Let's talk trash. You know, we had to be taught to renounce the powerful conservation ethic we had developed during the Great Depression and World War II. After the war, we needed to direct our enormous production capacity toward creation of products for peacetime. Life magazine helped in this effort by announcing the introduction of throwaways that would liberate the housewife from the drudgery of doing dishes. Mental note to the liberators: throwaway plastics take a lot of space and don't biodegrade. Only we humans make waste that nature can't digest. Plastics are also hard to recycle. A teacher told me how to express the under 5% of total plastics recovered in our waste stream. It's diddly point squat. That's the percentage we recycle. Now, melting point has a lot to do with this. Plastic is not purified by the remelting process like glass and metal. It begins to melt below the boiling point of water and does not drive off oily contaminants, for which it is a sponge. Half of each year's 100 billion pounds of thermoplastic pellets will be made into fast-track trash. A large, unruly fraction of our trash will flow down rivers to the sea. Here is the accumulation at Ballona Creek next to the LA airport, and here is the flotsam near California State University Long Beach and the desal plant we visited yesterday. In spite of deposit fees, much of this trash leading out to the sea will be plastic beverage bottles. We use 2 million of them in the United States every 5 minutes, here imaged by TED presenter Chris Jordan, who artfully documents mass consumption and zooms in for more detail. Here is a remote island repository for bottles off the coast of Baja California. Isla San Roque is an uninhabited bird rookery off Baja's sparsely populated central coast. Notice that the bottles here have caps on them. Bottles made of polyethylene terephthalate, PET, will sink in seawater and not make it this far from civilization. Also, the caps are produced in separate factories from a different plastic, polypropylene. They will float in seawater, but unfortunately do not get recycled under the bottle bills. Let's trace the journey of the millions of caps that make it to sea solo. After a year, the ones from Japan are heading straight across the Pacific, while ours get caught in the California current and first head down to the latitude of Cabo San Lucas. After 10 years, a lot of the Japanese caps are in what we call the Eastern Garbage Patch, while ours litter the Philippines. After 20 years, we see emerging the debris accumulation zone of the North Pacific Gyre. It so happens that millions of albatross nesting on Kure and Midway atolls in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands National Monument forage here and scavenge whatever they can find for regurgitation to their chicks. A 4-month-old Laysan albatross chick died with this in its stomach. Hundreds of thousands of the goose-sized chicks are dying, with stomachs full of bottle caps and other rubbish, like cigarette lighters. But mostly bottle caps. Sadly, their parents mistake bottle caps for food tossing about in the ocean surface. The retainer rings for the caps also have consequences for aquatic animals. This is Mae West, still alive at a zookeeper's home in New Orleans. I wanted to see what my hometown of Long Beach was contributing to the problem, so on Coastal Cleanup Day in 2005, I went to the Long Beach Peninsula at the east end of our Long Beach. We cleaned up the swaths of beach shown. I offered 5 cents each for bottle caps. I got plenty of takers. Here are the 1,100 bottle caps they collected. I thought I would spend $20 that day. I ended up spending nearly 60. I separated them by color and put them on display the next Earth Day at Cabrillo Marine Aquarium in San Pedro. Governor Schwarzenegger and his wife Maria stopped by to discuss the display. In spite of my girly man hat, crocheted from plastic shopping bags, they shook my hand. I showed him and Maria a zooplankton trawl from the Gyre north of Hawaii with more plastic than plankton. Here's what our trawl samples from the plastic soup our ocean has become look like. Trawling a zooplankton net on the surface for a mile produces samples like this and this. Now, when the debris washes up on the beaches of Hawaii, it looks like this. And this particular beach is Kailua Beach, the beach where our president and his family vacationed before moving to Washington. Now, how do we analyze samples like this one that contain more plastic than plankton? We sort the plastic fragments into different size classes from 5 millimeters to 1/3 of a millimeter. Small bits of plastic concentrate persistent organic pollutants up to 1,000,000 times their levels in the surrounding seawater. We wanted to see if the most common fish in the deep ocean at the base of the food chain was ingesting these poison pills. We did hundreds of necropsies, and over 1/3 had polluted plastic fragments in their stomachs. The record holder, only 2.5 inches long, had 84 pieces in its tiny stomach. Now, you can buy certified organic produce, but no fishmonger on earth can sell you a certified organic wild-caught fish. This is the legacy we are leaving to future generations. The throwaway society cannot be contained. It has gone global. We simply cannot store and maintain or recycle all our stuff. We have to throw it away. Now, the market can do a lot for us, but it can't fix the natural system in the ocean we've broken. All the king's horses and all the king's men will never gather up all the plastic and put the ocean back together again. The levels are increasing. The amount of packaging is increasing. The throwaway concept of living is proliferating, and it's showing up in the ocean.
He offers no hope of cleaning it up. Straining the ocean for plastic would be beyond the budget of any country, and it might kill untold amounts of sea life in the process. The solution, Moore says, is to stop the plastic at its source. Stop it on land before it falls into the ocean.
Now there's your typical t-shirt shopping bag.
And in a plastic-wrapped and packaged world, he doesn't hold out much hope for that either. This is Brian Rooney for Nightline in Long Beach, California.
Thank you.
I'm a visual artist, and I'm also one of the co-founders of the Plastic Pollution Coalition. I've been working with plastic bags, which I cut up and sew back together as my primary material for my artwork for the last 20 years. I turn them into 2- and 3-dimensional pieces and sculptures and installations. Upon working with the plastic, after about the first 8 years, some of my work started to fissure and break down into smaller little bits of plastic. And I thought, great, it's ephemeral, just like us. Upon educating myself a little further about plastics, I actually realized this was a bad thing. It's a bad thing that plastic breaks down into smaller little bits because it's always still plastic. And what we're finding is that a lot of it is in the marine environment. I then, in the last few years, learned about the Pacific Garbage Patch and the Gyre. And my initial reaction, and I think that this is a lot of people's first reaction to learning about it, is, oh my God, we've got to go out there and clean this thing up. So I actually developed a proposal to go out with a cargo ship and 2 decommissioned fishing trawlers, a crane, a chipping machine, and a cold molding machine. And my intention was to go out to the Gyre, raise awareness about this issue, and begin to pick up the plastic, chip it into little bits, and cold mold it into bricks that could potentially be used as building materials in underdeveloped communities. I began talking with people who actually had been out to the Gyre and were studying the plastic problem in the marine environment. And upon doing so, I realized actually that cleaning it up would be a very small drop in the bucket relative to how much is being generated every day around the world. And that actually I needed to back up and look at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is we need to find a way to turn off the faucet. We need to cut the spigot of single-use and disposable plastics, which are entering the marine environment every day on a global scale. So in looking at that, I also realized that I was really angry. I wasn't just concerned about plastic that you're trying to imagine out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, of which I've learned there are now 11 gyres potentially of plastic in 5 major oceans in the world. It's not just that gyre of plastic that I'm concerned about, it's the gyre of plastic in the supermarket. I go to the supermarket and all of my food is packaged in plastic. All of my beverages are packaged in plastic, even at the health food market. I'm also concerned about the plastic in the refrigerator. And I'm concerned about the plastic and the toxins that leach from plastic into us and into our bodies. So I came together with a group of other people who were all looking at this issue, and we created the Plastic Pollution Coalition. We have many initiatives that we're working on, but some of them are very basic. One is, if 80 to 90% of what we're finding in the ocean, of the marine debris that we're finding in the ocean is plastic, then why don't we call it what it is? It's plastic pollution. Recycling. Everybody kind of ends their books about being sustainable and greening with the idea of recycling. You put something in a bin and you don't have to think about it again. What is the reality of that? In the United States, less than 7% of our plastics are recycled. And if you really look into it, particularly when it comes to plastic bottles, most of it is only downcycled or incinerated or shipped to China. It is downcycled and turned into lesser things. While a glass bottle can be a glass bottle again or can be used again, a plastic bottle can never be a plastic bottle again. So this is a big issue for us. Another thing that we're looking at and asking people to think about is we've added a fourth R onto the front of the reduce, reuse, recycle 3 Rs, and that is refuse. Whenever possible, refuse single-use and disposable plastics. Alternatives exist. Some of them are very old school. I myself am now collecting these cool Pyrex containers and using those instead of Glad and Tupperware containers to store food in. And I know that I am doing a service to myself and my family. It's very easy to pick up a stainless steel bottle or a glass bottle if you're traveling and you've forgotten to bring your stainless steel bottle and fill that up with water or filtered water versus purchasing plastic bottled water. I guess what I want to say to everybody here, and I know that you guys know a lot about this issue, is that this is a huge problem in the oceans, but this is a problem that we've created as consumers and we can solve. We can solve this by raising awareness of the issue and teaching people to choose alternatives. So whenever possible, to choose alternatives to single-use plastics. We can cut the stem, tie the stem of this into our oceans, and in doing so, save our oceans, save our planet, save ourselves. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. So I heard someone say right as we finished watching that video that they felt hopeless after looking at that, and I agree. I've watched quite a few videos about the gyres and about particularly I think the site of the albatross. There's another documentary called Message in the Waves about the albatross that pick up plastic and feed it to their chicks, and the chicks just get full of plastic and can't even move, and it's incredibly depressing. But we're here to talk about ways that we can change that as well. So my name is Jenny Romer, and I'm an attorney. And the way that I got involved in plastic pollution in the ocean is I was a law student in San Francisco, and while I was a student, I had to choose a topic to write about for a law journal article, and I chose to write about the San Francisco plastic bag ban that had just been adopted at that time. And so I wanted to get some firsthand experience of how that came about. So I volunteered in the supervisor's office in San Francisco, and I became kind of a point person where cities from all over the country would call and ask, why we did it and how we did it, and for copies of the ordinance. And I realized that it was something that could spread to other cities really easily, but there wasn't a central resource for cities to go to. So because I'm from San Francisco, everyone has a website, so I made my own website about it, plasticbaglaws.org. And that was about 3 years ago, and in that time it's just blown up. I get emails from citizens or mayors of cities almost every day that are interested in legislation to reduce single-use plastic bags. And so after San Francisco passed their law, other California cities tried to do the same, and they ran into a lot of lawsuits. And part of the basis of those lawsuits was, are plastic bags really all that bad? Like, maybe paper is worse. And that was the plastics industry's argument. And they spent a lot of money suing cities, and part of it was they talked about the ocean gyres. And the plastics industry said they don't exist. And the words that are used to describe these, the patches or the islands, like twice the size of Texas, the plastics industry paid for professors to put out studies saying, you know, they aren't twice the size of Texas, they aren't islands, they're not describing them right. So then I got involved in figuring out exactly what these islands are, what these patches were, partially so that we wouldn't get sued in how we describe them. And so in June, I'm actually going on a trip from Bermuda to Rhode Island with a group called Five Gyres to research plastics in the ocean. And so I'm very excited to have better words to describe exactly what's out there. And the reason why it's called Five Gyres is I think it was mentioned briefly in the video. So there are 5 major ocean gyres. And a gyre is, I was a marine biology major in college, so it kind of came in handy that we studied these gyres, and they're places where all the ocean currents make it so that there are naturally upwellings of nutrients in these parts of the ocean, where it's the middle of nowhere, but it's a place where traditionally there are upwellings of certain nutrients, so there are algal blooms, and that's why these albatross and these different animals travel specifically to these places to get their food. But unfortunately now, instead of having these blooms, that's because of the ocean currents, that's where all the garbage goes. That's where and plastic tends to be what kind of survives out in the ocean. So in addition to getting the plankton and different little fish and things like that, these albatross and these other animals are going and picking up pieces of plastic and bringing them back to their families, their babies. So that's a little bit of background on how I got involved, and maybe I can share with you after I visit. So I just have how I kind of confront this issue is through reducing single-use plastic bags. And it's a very specific thing, but I see it as a kind of a gateway drug towards other types of single-use plastic reduction. So once people notice that they can reduce their use of plastic bags by so much without very much effort, then I think they start noticing, how many plastic water bottles they use, and whether if they're going to purchase something, looking at the shelf, if there's something that's super packaged versus something that doesn't quite have as much packaging, maybe they'll pay more attention to that. So I'll tell you a little bit about plastic bag ordinances, since it's my favorite thing to talk about. How can I go forward with this?
Should be just the right here, right?
Up there, we go. Okay. So because I'm a lawyer, I'll give a little disclaimer, this isn't legal advice. So plastic bags have become an icon of waste. And so there are a few reasons for that. One is that they're a large component of windblown litter. They're very thin, and they tend to get, even if you dispose of them properly, they tend to get caught up in the wind. I've seen them blow out of trash cans if they don't have anything in them. So here are a couple other pictures. I live in Brooklyn in New York, and I see plastic bags all of the time in trees. There's a nice little romantic nighttime shot of a plastic bag in a tree. And so they've become an icon too because they're given away for free. So very little thought is given to whether you need it and how it's going to be disposed of. Unlike most things, you usually have to pay for things. And then they're designed to just be used very briefly to transport an item home, or I've seen a lot of people just transport them out of the store and throw the bag away. And then they persist in the environment forever. And the plastics industry groups like to spend a lot of time arguing about exactly how long plastic persists in the environment, and whether it's 100 years or 500 years, but I just say forever. And then the other thing about it is it's something, plastic bags are something that you can do something about immediately to make a difference. And that's by simply refusing a bag yourself at checkout or working with local groups on legislative campaigns that will affect much larger groups. And it leads to really immediately tangible results. It's a result you can see. So a background on the types of ordinances that have been adopted. It kind of started on a large scale in 2004 in Ireland. Ireland adopted a plastic bag ban, or sorry, they adopted a fee. It's about 22 euro cents, which was pretty high, and they set it at that amount because they wanted to have it just be enough for people to not to think about it, to stop people from using bags. But if it was a situation where they really wanted it, they would pay. And they wanted to have about a 90% reduction. That's why they chose it. And they will adjust it up and down a little bit based on consumption. And that was just immediately effective. And there was a lot of problems with plastic bag litter on the roadsides in Ireland. And that just immediately went away within a year. And it was very popular. So San Francisco environmental commissioners visited Dublin. They learned about this, they came back, and we wanted to adopt a similar ban in San Francisco. Similar fee in San Francisco at that time. So they started out with a proposal for a 17-cent fee, and there was some positive press about it. They were talking about it, they did some reports. But then the Grocers Association went to the mayor and said, they had a letter of agreement that said, let's look into this issue some more. Let's wait 6 months. Don't do anything about it. And in that time, the grocers and some other industry groups went to the state in California and preempted all local charges. So they snuck in a little bit of language at the end of a recycling bill and said, can't do anything locally. So San Francisco responded by saying, well, we'll ban them. We can't put a charge on them, we're just going to ban them. And I don't think anyone saw that coming. It was something that hadn't been done before. And then that got a lot of press. And that led to the plastics industry hiring this attorney, Mr. Stephen Joseph, who formed Save the Plastic Bag Coalition. He is known as my nemesis. I speak at a lot of hearings on the opposite side of him, and he has all kinds of very creative arguments about why plastic bags are good for the environment. So he has sued California cities under anything that he can think of to delay ordinances being adopted. So under I mentioned the environmental grounds where it says that paper could be worse than plastic, so every city should spend $100,000 and create a full environmental impact report and study this for a couple years, which actually a couple cities did end up doing, larger ones, and they found that it was perfectly acceptable to adopt these ordinances. And another one was Prop 26, the plastics industry and some other groups pushed for an initiative on the ballot in California that amended our Constitution to change the definition of what was a tax, so that having a charge on a paper bag, because we kind of shifted after the environmental claims, we're like, okay, we'll ban plastic, and because of these paper concerns, we'll put a small charge on paper. And because of that, they had pushed for Prop 26 that changed what it meant to have a tax versus a regulatory fee. And as a result of that, we had to amend the laws a little bit again and just let the retailer keep the whole amount of the charge. So that it wasn't a tax, it didn't go to the government. Retailers keep the money for this thing that they are providing to you. And the courts found that was okay. And then he's used other arguments like the California Retail Food Code saying that it's preempted to have any kind of regulation of plastic bags under that. but he's lost in that argument a couple times already. Um, So other California cities went forward. We started including the minimum charge on paper bags. So there's an overall reduction in single-use bags. And we've seen really great results. In LA County, after the first year of implementation, we saw there was a ban on plastic and then also a 30% reduction in paper bag use. So that led to a 95% overall reduction in single-use bags. That's just in 1 year, and there wasn't really much negative feedback from customers. They just they got it, that they had to now remember to bring their bags, and a 10-cent charge wasn't a huge penalty if they forgot their bags. But it's something that most people are so used to getting for free that they see so little value in a bag, they don't think it's worth 10 cents. They kind of take it as an affront to have to pay it. So most people will kind of, put something, carry it out to their car rather than purchase the bag, which is a huge behavior change. And several cities in Colorado have adopted similar ordinances. Washington D.C. adopted a 5-cent charge on all single-use bags in 2009, which led to at least a 60% reduction, somewhere between 60 and 80, depending on what you look at. And that was a huge game changer because 5 cents we didn't think would make that much of a difference, but it did, and they were able to collect a couple $1 million to clean up their river. Other developing countries adopted bans on ultra-thin bags, and that's because those tend to clog sewer drains and cause flooding. And New York City area, including Westport, Connecticut, adopted plastic bag bans starting around 2011 and still going till today, although they just started, the town of Mamaroneck just received a letter threatening a lawsuit recently, so it's going to heat up a little bit here. And in San Francisco, in 2012, I worked with the city with that same supervisor. I started volunteering with his office. I worked with them for about 3 years on expanding their ordinance. It was just applied to supermarkets and large chain pharmacies. And I worked with them for 3 years. We did all this outreach. We looked at what was going on all over the country. And now they have the most comprehensive ordinance in the country where it applies to every retailer. If you go to a liquor store, if you go to Chinatown, plastic bags are banned, and there's a 10-cent charge on all other types of bags. And so I was really proud of that, and then I moved to New York City to work on similar ordinances there. So hopefully in the next few months you'll hear of an ordinance being introduced in New York City. So my personal recommendation to cities is to ban ultra-thin plastic bags because they're the ones that cause the biggest problems. They get caught in the wind, they end up in trees, they end up in the sewers, they end up in the ocean, and then put a minimum charge on everything else just so that we don't switch from one type of bag to another to give it, the best way is to have a charge on other types. So I've been developing the Clean Seas Coalition Atlantic Division in and around New York City. So getting the groups together that already care about this issue, that have already been working on it, and having them work together so we can make greater progress. So in order to get involved, I'm specifically working on New York City ordinances, so I have a website, bagatnyc.org, but then also my website, plasticbaglaws.org, has a lot of information on how these ordinances were implemented, and then I also track general single-use plastics news. So that's my basic presentation, and I'd like to see if anyone has questions either about plastic bags or about plastics in the ocean in general.
I reuse my plastic bags for garbage bags. And if they weren't available, then I feel like I have to buy them.
Right. Well, I focus on ordinances where just the thinnest plastic bags are banned, and so that there still are, and then there's a charge on everything else. So generally, you'd still have an option to buy a bag at the store, but you'd have to pay 5 or 10 cents for it. And that way, it's not a huge amount to pay for your garbage can liner, but I like to have that option available so that you can still reuse that bag. Unfortunately, most people don't have a plan for what they're going to do with their plastic bag after they get it, but for people that do, it's nice to have that option. And you can be at the register and think, do I want to purchase another bag today or not?
Yeah, but what I'm thinking about is, what options do we have for garbage other than plastic?
It depends, and it depends a lot on your municipality too. Some municipalities require that you have plastics in your cans, or you put it out on the curb just in a bag, not in a garbage can. In San Francisco, when I lived there, everyone had a can. Well, everyone had a garbage can, a composting can, and a recycling can, and we have a 73% diversion rate, and you didn't have to use a plastic bag for all the garbage you put in your can. So it really depends on where you are for that.
Well, what happens to all those? I usually collect my bags and bring them back to some place like Kohl's or Big Y. What happens to all those you put into those recycle bins?
Well, that's a good question. I just have helped work on a documentary about what happens to plastic bags in New York, and that was one of the things we looked at. So if you put plastic bags just in your curbside recycling, then they end up in the landfill, basically. And a lot of the time it contaminates the other recyclables and makes it more difficult for your recycling company. But if you bring it to the grocery store, there are programs, and I'm not sure about Connecticut, but most states it's a state mandated recycling program where the supermarkets have to recycle or have to have a collection.
And container, right.
Right. And that really depends, because plastic bags are really low grade, not valuable material. So the main place that they end up is in composite decking, which means basically the main company is called Trex. And so they take kind of wood chips and they add plastic bag resin into the wood chips, and they create decking out of it. So there is some market for it, but generally it's not going to be turned back into a plastic bag. And in some cases, if a lot of the time it ends up being contaminated in some way, and if it's contaminated, meaning that someone else puts a soda in the recycling can at the grocery store or something, then that is just going to end up being thrown away. And then the other market is sending it to somewhere else like China, where under EPA guidelines, if it's shipped there and someone calls it recycling, it's recycling, but we don't really know what happens to it most of the time. And a lot of the time it can mean that it just gets incinerated. So I think that plastic bag recycling is just a distraction, really, from the main issue. I really focus on overall reduction and just not taking a bag to begin with, rather than spending all this time and energy, transporting it to the store, having whoever picks up the bags from the store bring it somewhere, figuring out, on the commodities market how much to sell it for. And from what I've heard, a lot of the time when these are collected, the community, or if municipalities collect them, and some in California have collected a ton of plastic bags and either not been able to sell it on the commodities market or sold it for about $16 after spending $3,000 on all the efforts to get that ton together.
I have a comment and a question. My comment is about the recycling center in Hartford. It's a state-run facility that I brought my grandchildren to, and they loved it. It's great. You can take tours, and it's very educational. I highly recommend that field.
I like a good recycling tour.
Yeah. My question is, the gyres, we know how much surface they cover. Do we know how deep?
No, and it really varies because we're not talking about an evenly spread out area. It really depends on what's out there, and plastic photodegrades, particularly if we're talking about plastic bags. You know, a lot of the time you aren't going to see any because they're so thin, and if they're in the sun, they're going to photodegrade down to almost nothing, but they're still there. And I was counsel for Center for Environmental Health in California, and what I studied or researched a lot there was toxics in consumer products. So I looked a lot into the Toxics in Packaging Act, and under that act you can have you're allowed to have 100 parts per million lead and cadmium and other toxic products in plastics that touch food. So, you know, we have all these plastics with, you know, just little bits of toxic materials in them that are allowed, and that ends up in the ocean. So even if we don't see the plastics there, it's still, you know, those toxics are still in the water, the little microscopic bits of plastics are still in the water, and because of how the ocean current works, those are being, you know, accumulated where fish go to feed, which we eventually eat. So, but to answer your question, no, we don't know exactly how deep it goes, but that's part of what you're trying to do in going out and researching it. So the group that I'm going with, we do trawls to measure, like, mostly from the surface, how much plastic is out there and in which areas, and we do GPS tracking of that. But, you know, there aren't really that many groups so far that are looking into them.
Is there any effort at all being made to pull what is visible out of the oceans?
There is some, but I think, you know, this just wasn't something that people thought about until a few years ago. So there are different groups and that are researching it, but there aren't any solid efforts so far. And you know, and I've heard the American Chemistry Council is the main plastics industry group in the United States, and they've worked with some researchers saying, like, that trying to promote the plastic in the gyres as a resource or as a commodity, and saying, you know, let's get corporations and go out and research what's there and take it out and turn it in, you know, have barges with factories on it and turn it into something marketable, and this is great that we have this resource. And no, I don't think that's a really viable business model.
Until somebody can make more money treating it than they can collecting it.
Yeah, so I focus on not putting more of it out there, and, you know, getting people to think about their single-use plastic bag use, and then their single-use plastic use generally. But it is something that other groups are looking into, you know, what we can do to get it out without destroying the natural environment that's out there. I mean, there's still plenty of life going on, and Charles Moore, if you have time, he's a good guy to look into. I think he was on Letterman. There's a YouTube of him on Letterman, and he also has a more recent talk that I've seen him give a couple times about how there are certain fish that are kind of making homes out in the gyres, and you know, and these plastics accumulate toxins on them, like persistent organic pollutants, and the fish are, you know, living within these new plastic environments out there. So he's doing some research into that right now, which I think is really interesting. But we don't want to promote it as a new habitat. We want to reduce it.
Do we have bags that are more biodegradable than others? I mean, for like garbage?
Here, I have an example to show you of a. I didn't get into the biodegradable issue, but let's see. Where is my? Okay. So, and In California, one of the lawsuits that I helped file before I left was against this company for this 100% degradable, biodegradable bag. But the problem is that biodegradable doesn't really mean anything. There's no definition for it. And according to the Federal Trade Commission, you have to disclose exactly what you mean when you say biodegradable. And under California law, it's a prohibitive term to use when you're talking about plastic bags, because the legislature found that it's inherently misleading. Because people see this and they go, oh, well, that's a perfect, like I can use 1 million of them and they're fine. And they also found that people are more likely to litter them because they think, oh, it's just like a leaf or something. It'll degrade in the environment. So, no, they're not a solution. I actually think that they're worse because they make people, it's kind of, we call it greenwashing, where people feel more comfortable using a product because they think that they're doing something good for the environment.
But you're saying there are none then?
No, well, there's one exception. So biodegradable doesn't mean anything. Compostable is a term that actually has a definition. Under ASTM 6400, it sets exactly what compostable means, and means that there are certain facilities, commercial facilities, where the bags or the plastic will break down. I'm still, I still like to avoid it if possible, because I don't really know what resins are in there. But with compostable, if you see that, that does mean something. But the problem is, if something's compostable, it needs to go to a compostable facility specific to that. If you go out and buy a biodegradable or a compostable plastic bag for your garbage, and you put it in the landfill, it's not going to do anything. They cost more, and in a landfill environment, landfills are made so that everything just stays the way that it is.
Now, when I was a kid, we didn't have plastic bags, and we put garbage in a can.
And you
they come out
survived,
and they collected it,
okay?
and I hate to tell you what that was like on a hot summer day.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
nobody would ever go back to that. But, you know.
Yeah, I've been around a compostable, or in San Francisco we have curbside recycling, and it gets a little smelly every once in a while during the summer. But so, at this point, I would say, if you're going to use a plastic bag, just use a traditional plastic bag rather than opting to spend more money on the biodegradable or the compostable, unless you're specifically buying a compostable bag that you know is going to go into a compostable facility. That's the only exception I would make. So I saved you some money there.
I have a question. Why can't the manufacturers of plastic bags be required to make a bag that's recyclable? And further, why on all plastic bags aren't the contents listed as they are in food products?
Well, so when you see these little recycling, the chasing arrow symbols,
Yes.
all that really means is it's a resin identifier. So this one has a little 2 with arrows around it and says that means that it's high density polyethylene. And there's some that are some plastic bags are made out of number 4. So it doesn't mean that it's recyclable at any specific place. It just is telling you that if it's possible to recycle me, then this is what I am. So a lot of people are confused and they put them in their curbside recycling because they say, oh, it's recyclable. But all it is telling you what type of resin it is. And a lot of them, are recyclable if you have the need for that particular type of resin. But because these are so thin, once you get with polyethylene, once you get this thin, it's really you can't make it thicker without kind of losing the.
Well, it took somebody pretty damn smart to be able to make a bag that thin that your groceries won't tear holes in. So why don't they turn that smartness around and figure a way to get rid of it, or just ban it? What you need to do, Madam Lawyer, is to figure out a way to get Homeland Security in this, that the bags are really a threat to our security, and that terrorists can use them to put over your head to choke you to death, and this problem will be solved.
I hadn't thought of that angle.
The overhead part, yeah.
Because it's all political anyway. It's all money that's driving it.
Right, it is
There's
very
no-
political.
nothing practical about this at all.
Mhm.
And I shop at Costco on occasion. Costco has no bags. There used to be a place up in Worcester that was known as Spags, No Bags. You could go there and buy whatever you wanted, it was cheap, and you had to figure out a way to get out of the store by yourself. And I don't see a reason why we can't go to that. Or that they offer, they said, if you want something to put the bag in, here's a nice green sack that we use, and we'll sell you that for $1. And you can reuse it, reuse it, reuse it.
And I agree, you should come around and speak with me.
But I think the other thing is to educate the people. I happen to live in a condominium complex, and we have big recyclable bins, and we have regular trash bins. And no matter how many times you tell the individuals in there, number one, they won't break down their cardboard boxes, and they throw the cardboard boxes in with the trash. Now, these are fine recyclable fibers. I don't know how to get to them.
Right. Well, I worked with the documentary filmmakers I worked with, traveled to a paper recycling facility and a recycling facility and just, saw the amount of plastic bags that were that had to be manually sorted out of everything. And then then they were such a low value material, there was no market for them. So they had to just be put in landfill. And in New York, so they showed the travel of, had to go from New York City to New Jersey for sorting, and then someone at the city had to pay for a truck to drive it to West Virginia to go to a landfill. So I think hopefully, as we educate people more about these things, that they can I think seeing a video or something short on exactly what happens once you put it in the trash can. Because most people put something in the recycling or put something in the trash can and they don't think anything else about it. So
What's the downside of burning a plastic bag?
And you're releasing all types of
But
toxins.
if you burned it
the
in a
air.
controlled environment, what happens to it? Will it turn to ash or will it melt?
It does happen at incineration facilities, but I haven't actually watched it happen, so
I
I
think
couldn't tell you.
all the stacks have to have what they call scrubbers
Mhm.
that remove the toxins.
Right, and that's the thing about China. When we're sending our bags to China, they don't have the same, Clean Air Act regulations that we do here. So it's a totally different environment where they can just burn them and without any kind of scrubbers or regulation.
Well, they're overpopulated, they can afford to kill their people.
Why do medical companies use plastic bottles to put their pills in? And if they're like a baby bottle, is there something in that plastic that could be leaching into an aspirin or a whatever that you take?
Right.
You don't get them in a glass bottle.
Right, and I don't use plastics in my home to store things, and I try to not have it touch my food. I don't microwave plastics, so I don't really microwave. But there are things like phthalates, BPA that are in plastics to make them more malleable, and in bottles, and they're in can linings too. And there are regulations for these things, but unfortunately, these regulations aren't always enforced, and there are such small amounts that I think it's better to be safe. And if we know that there are these chemicals in plastics, just to avoid using them altogether, because all of these little tiny amounts add up.
Ocean liners that were notorious for dumping anything and everything into the ocean, has that stopped? I mean, either voluntarily or legally? In other words, have they cleaned up their act?
From what I've heard, yes, but I don't really hear that as being a main source of marine pollution. From the studies that I've seen, most of it comes from coastal areas, not from dumping in the ocean itself by liners. But I'm not sure the extent that, it probably depends on who the ship belongs to, the level of regulation.
maybe a good idea for some of it, the plastic water bottles, is to get municipal water companies to make their water a bit better. If you try working with them to make it more potable and drinkable,
Right.
maybe there would be less plastic water bottles.
Right, and in the areas that do have good water, promoting that water. In San Francisco, we had, I'm no longer a resident, we have the Hetch Hetchy, which is in Yosemite Valley. That's where San Francisco's water comes from, and it's really great water. But people still drink bottled water just because it's, people just associate that. Right. But in City Hall, they banned plastic water bottle use, and just, and put water fountains with cups. And that was just a simple step to, and they had, a big press conference, had taste tests of their water versus bottled water, and people couldn't tell the difference or thought that the city's water was better. So I think in those areas, it's kind of an easy thing to do to get people away from the single-use plastic bottles. There is one thing, and you mentioned, like, why do people use plastic bags now? It's with the plastics industry does spend a lot of money promoting plastic bag use. I saw before San Francisco's law even was actually proposed, I saw a PowerPoint presentation by a group associated with the American Chemistry Council that had a $500,000 budget on PR, on how to promote plastic bags as a personal freedom, and as sanitary and all these other things, where it's not, these ideas aren't necessarily coming from everyday people. They're coming from an industry that wants to support their product. And the American Chemistry Council is also behind, you might have heard of studies about bacteria and reusable bags. One of those studies was that professor received money from the American Chemistry Council to do this research. And his research showed that there was some bacteria in reusable bags, but it wasn't an amount that was larger than you would see in a lot of places. And the overall take home was you should wash your reusable bags just like you would any other reusable product. So I kind of see myself as one person battling this industry, but luckily there are a lot of other groups out there, and it's something that that people are getting more and more involved in, and kind of seeing through their arguments. And I don't think that it's hopeless. Yes.
Are there any dangers to reusing, refilling a one-use water bottle? I will buy one and I'll just keep refilling it and refilling it until it begins to look a little.
Yeah, I personally, and this is just my opinion, is that I tend to buy the ones that have the wider mouths, and that way you can actually clean them like you would a regular cup or something, rather than the ones that have the really small hole at the top.
About, your normal Poland Spring or your Dasani.
Yeah, with those, that's something where I personally don't, maybe once, but it's another thing where it is a single-use plastic. There are regulations about what toxics can be in it, and limits on the amount of, the chemicals under the act that I was talking about, the Toxin in Packaging Act. But, there still could be something in there, and there could be something that's softening that plastic that can leach into your water, especially if a lot of people keep them in their cars, like my mom keeps their plastic bottles in her car, and then you're in the car and it gets hot out, and then it gets cold, and the plastic, as it expands and contracts, there could be something going into your water. It's likely, but it's something. Those kind of things are hard to show, and because there's small amounts of chemicals. So I take the precautionary approach and avoid doing that, and I have stainless steel water bottle with a wide mouth that I clean out, and actually I have a really small one so that I can carry it around easily. That's just me.
Well, you can thank the medical community for the use of bottled water, because they insist we drink 64 ounces of water a day. And if you're on the move most of the time, you gotta take it with you.
Well,
And the ideal way is to buy it in a 1/2 liter bottle, whatever it is they sell it in. And
well, I challenge you to get a stainless steel bottle and you can still measure the ounces in there if you have, and reduce your plastic use by a lot. If you're consuming plastic water bottles every day, then those add up really, really quickly. We saw the pictures and the videos of how, it doesn't, if you recycle it, that's one thing, but that's still a lot of resources that go into recycling.
I'll accept your challenge, and if you know anybody that wants about 2,000 water bottles, I got them in my garage, and I just stand out of the stomach to go over there to the supermarket in that messy environment, plug them into a machine, but I will not give up. They will be recycled by somebody.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll come back after my voyage and
The Boy
we
Scouts?
can check up on you.
Boy Scouts.
Boy Scouts came
Yeah,
to my
they're
house.
welcome to them. Canfield Boy Scouts?
Yep,
Yeah, it was an Eagle Scout for
There you
his
go.
thing.
yep, the Boy Scouts
Do we
day.
have time? or-
Any final questions, next round? Or should we wrap up?
Do you think it saved the environment by by buying a cloth bag to carry your groceries in as opposed to the plastic ones? I know everybody does it, but
Yeah, I think it's just something like we were talking about bacteria in bags and things like that. It's just something like any other piece of clothing that if you use it a few times, you generally wash it. So I'd say just follow that same habit with reusable bags. And I have a huge collection of them because a lot of events I go to, I get a reusable bag. But I particularly like the ones. There's a company called Chico Bag that makes ones that kind of go down into its own little pouch, so they're easy to carry around, and the material's light, but it works really well. And then because some of the ones that you get at the supermarket for 99 cents or whatever, they don't always stand up to that many uses. And I actually count with the different bags that I have. I like to try to keep track of how many times I use them, because one of the plastics industry's argument is if you buy a reusable bag and you use it once, has a bigger footprint than using just one plastic bag. So, and a lot of the time you have to use a reusable bag about 10 times or 20 times, depending on exactly what that bag's made out of. So, I think if you're going to get a reusable bag, get one that you like, that you're going to use a lot of times, and wash it.
Thank you so much for coming, that was great.